Hi, buddy. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Marvel Reread Club. It is time to do the books of November 1967, and we have a special guest. Welcome to Mike Collins. Hi, Mike.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
That's so good to have you. So Mike Collins is a British writer, penciler, primarily a penciler who has done lots of amazing stuff over the years. I think that I read your very first comic because I was one of the few American fans of the Captain Britain Monthly magazine. You wrote issue 4, and then I think one of the first things you illustrated was the Cherubim backup in like issue 11 or something like that. Was that one of your first art credits?
No, actually my first art credit was bizarrely a Daredevil parody. So so it was a 4-page Mickey take of Frank Miller's Daredevil, which Marvel UK were reprinting at the time in a monthly comic that was called Mighty World of Marvel that ran loads of reprint strips. And it was written by Alan Moore. So my very first commercial artwork was it was drawing from an Alan Moore script, kind of a high point to start at.
Yes, that is awesome.
Just a bit.
But then you had a long career in America. You worked on a lot of American books. You drew the first appearance of Gambit?
I did, yes.
So do you get like co-creator credit when he appears in a Marvel movie? Does it say Gambit created by Chris Claremont and Mike Collins?
Didn't on Wolverine versus Deadpool, so apparently I didn't do it. I mean, I always say that I didn't create Gambit. Gambit was created by Jim Lee. And because this was the pre-internet days, they had to send me through a fax of Jim's initial Sharpie marker sketch of Gambit's outfit. I had to go to the copy shop in my village at 3:00 in the afternoon to wait for that fax to come through. And so the way Gambit looks is based on me squinting at this Jim Lee marker sketch that was then faxed. So there might be things about that outfit that are just down to the degradation of the quality of the image. I don't know.
Wow.
You penciled a Batman book that Steve inked. That's how you guys got to know each other. And since then, you've been doing a ton of Doctor Who.
Absolutely, yeah.
Really beautiful Doctor Who work in the Doctor Who Monthly magazine that I have enjoyed reading myself. So it is just so good to have you on. Welcome.
Oh, I'm very flattered to be here.
So Matt introduced you as British. I know that you live in Wales. Are you Welsh?
I've lived in Wales for 40 years now, so I've probably been adopted. My family are all Irish, but I was born in the English Midlands. So I basically ticked everything on the box apart from Scottish. So I need to get that at some point.
Yeah, our mom's maiden name was Murphy. So right. All 4 of her grandparents were born in Ireland. So
hey, that means you can get an Irish passport.
Nope. Doesn't. No. I believe me, I looked. My mom can. My mom still can today if she wanted to, but since she didn't do it before I was born, then I am out of luck. Yeah. Believe me, I've looked. No reason.
So Mike, was this your first time reading these old Marvel comics?
Well, that's an interesting question because I've gone through the stories and some I recognize, some I don't. I'm 64, so I started reading Marvel comics in about 1971, 1972 when they were being reprinted in British weeklies. So I would pick those comics up and they would have like 3 stories in each issue, but they were usually split in half. So what we're getting there is like the Marvel universe at like double speed. So we get 2 issues a month running through the stories. And they were all reprinted in black and white with bizarre way British comics were done at the time with one colour. Mighty World of Marvel, which was the first comic, had green because the Hulk was the main character. So every comic strip had shades of green on it. So black and white and green and some tone work. And then Spider-Man got his own title. And they used red on that one. So you had black and white and red.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird approach, but I still kind of like it. When Sean Martinborough did that run on Batman, where was it, in the late 90s or 2000s, something like that, where he did black and white and red, it just felt nostalgic to me.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I'm fascinated with is that, what we're doing here, the project that we are undertaking is reading all these things in chronological order as a kid getting these things off the spinner rack in New York City or whatever would be reading them. And that is not at all the way that kids got these things in the UK.
No.
And so, which just seems weird. For me, context tends to be everything. And so the idea of just sort of getting these things kind of willy-nilly in dribs and drabs, in whatever sort of order they feel like putting them out feels a little bit like, wow, what would that be like?
Well, I can give you a perfect example of that. I was on a family holiday vacation to a seaside resort in mid-70s. And I went around the town, and they had spinner racks in there. I mean, we did get American comics through, but they just weren't as well distributed. But I managed to pick up every single issue of OMAC from different newsagents as I wandered around the town. So when I started the holiday, I had no OMAC. By the end of the holiday, I had all OMAC and loads of Commandees as well. So I was very happy about that. But it's a weird way of approaching this stuff.
The way that we got into reading these comics in the first place is we had a beach vacation that was very cool and drizzly the entire time. And so our parents went down to the local convenience store and saw some comics on a spinner rack. And they're like, maybe this will keep these kids occupied for this week that we can't really go to the beach. And indeed, for those kind of spinner rack things, you had all sorts of just random issues from the past 6 months that would be on those things. And Matt has a whole quest he talks about with trying to find part 2 of the first part of a story that we got on that first batch of comics.
And definitely my parents found a way to keep us occupied for the next 50 years.
Oh, that's great. It's kind of weird how I sort of absorbed American comics. So we had the weekly reprints, and then occasionally I would then see American comics and I would pick them up and buy them. But a friend of my dad's at work, his son had grown out of comics, so he gifted me a whole stack of, it was adventure comics for the Legion of Superheroes. So I had about 3 years worth of adventure comics just dumped on me. And I think that's probably why, of all the DC titles, I've always felt closest to the Legion, because I just I basically mainlined them over a couple of weeks.
I love that book.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, we should go ahead and jump in and cover the books of November 1967. So have you had a chance to read all 9 of these, Mike?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Fantastic.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and begin with Amazing Spider-Man number 54. Steve, should I do this or should you?
Why don't you?
All right, let's go ahead and do The Tentacles and the Trap. We're in the middle of a 3-part storyline with Dr. Octopus. He has bizarrely decided he needs a place to stay. So he is taken up as Aunt May's roomer. He is going to be rent a room from Aunt May. And she recognizes him, says you're Dr. Octopus. You kidnapped me back in 1964. And he's like, yes, but that's not a problem. Here's why I can explain that away. And then it says explanation 1967. So they're seemingly going in real time here. They're saying that happened back in 64 and they're saying it's currently 67.
Explanation 67, I think, is a play on Exposition 67, which was which was the Montreal World's Fair that was going on at this moment that is being referenced in the Daredevil issue as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely,
But if you remember correctly, Aunt May, even at the time in the 1964 Spider-Man annual, was a little bit addled, it seems, and saw the whole kidnapping thing as, she was a guest in his home. So,
yes.
Anyway, and he's on the run from the law, so he's just wanting to get a place he can lay low.
Yeah, my big problem with this story is just that Aunt May seems so dippy, and it's sort of out of character for her to be this dippy. But, oh well. So then Spider-Man is swinging around looking for Dr. Octopus.
Well, why don't you do the credits?
Okay, let's go and do the credits. Brought to you at its full flavor peak by Stan the Man Lee and John Ringadink Ramita, embellished by Mickey DeMeo, who is really Mike Esposito, and lettered by Sam Rosen. He's looking for Dr. Octopus, doesn't realize that Dr. Octopus is with his aunt, we see Dr. Octopus is like, hey, let me try to contact my old Master Planner goons. Maybe they've just been waiting by the phone all these years. And indeed they have. And we see one of them just sitting in his little high-tech basement with his Master Planner mask hung up, just waiting to be used again. And he says, Dr. Octopus, exclamation point, exclamation point. I've been waiting to hear from you, exclamation point. And Dr. Octopus says, your wait is over. Soon we shall strike again. So he summons up his goons. Meanwhile, we see that Harry Osborn is still pissed at Pete for being an absentee roommate. We see Pete goes to the Daily Bugle. He finally gets to meet Randy Robertson, the new black city editor.
You said a third name that is not actually his name. I think you just said Randy Robertson.
As opposed to wait, what was his name before?
It was Robbie Robertson.
Sorry.
Randy's his son, yeah.
So, yes, Randy's his son. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Later, we will meet his son, Randy, but we meet Robbie Robertson, but Stanley has gotten confused and now calls him Joe Robertson. So they will later explain that his full name is Joe Robbie Robertson, and he will have a son named Randy Robertson, which is why I got confused. Pete establishes his long-standing friendship he will have with Joe Robbie Robertson, and then Pete says hi to his supporting cast. Then he goes home and finds out that Aunt May has Dr. Octopus living there. And Pete is less dippy than Aunt May and is instantly like, you have to get out of this house. You are an evil supervillain. Even though I am in my secret identity, I am still more than willing to say, even I, Peter Parker, know you're an evil supervillain. Get the hell out of my house.
But he's saying that he can't basically say that because it'll give away that he's Spider-Man. And I'm like, no, he is literally publicly a fugitive from the law right now. This is in the news.
He then goes ahead and confronts him as Spider-Man. They get in a big fight. The Master Planner goons show up, and so he has to fight them off too. So Spider-Man never one to really worry about property damage. You would think that this one time, given that it is his own property, he would worry about property damage, but he does not. He smashes through the window to go ahead and confront Dr. Octopus. Then Dr. Octopus, when they're done, smashes through the wall to leave, leaving Aunt May comatose from fainting when she sees them fighting. Peter goes ahead and rips his mask off, basically ready to tell all to Aunt May, but Aunt May is still unconscious. And then he thinks better of it and changes back to Peter Parker by the time Dr. Bromwell gets there. And then Dr. Bromwell leaves, Aunt May is trying to recover, and Pete suddenly realizes, oh, I smashed the hell out of my own house. That was probably a mistake. And then he rants and raves out the window and shakes his fist and swears he will get Dr. Octopus. Says, but even Spidey cannot suspect the startling fate that awaits him when they meet again next dish. Be here when disaster strikes Spider-Man. So that was this issue of Spider-Man. Mike, what did you think of this issue?
Such a bizarre setup, the whole idea that of all the people in all the boroughs of New York, he ends up going to his enemy's aunt's house.
Yep, that's a big coincidence.
It's a wonderful conceit, but it's just like, why? He gets a hell of a room. It's a bigger room than Peter gets.
Yeah. He gets a huge room. So are you a fan of Romita's Spider-Man in general? What did you think of the art on this issue?
Oh, I love Romita's Spider-Man. I kind of took a while to get into Ditko. Romita, for me, was more my Spider-Man. So I love this. Mike Esposito's inks are actually quite thorough on this. I mean, I think in the 70s, I think he was given too much work and he just sort of hack through stuff. But they're quite nice on this. I mean, as ever, it's got Stan overwriting every single frame, but
yes.
I mean, good Lord. I mean, the amount of balloons on some of the pages.
Yes.
Well, that's nothing compared to some early Roy Thomas issues we've been through.
Yeah.
There were some where they clearly had to move panel borders in order to fit these things in. One thing that I noticed is it just me or does Aunt May's house seem off model?
Yeah. It sort of has to be to fit all the story into it.
Well, but not to the interior, the exterior. I'd always thought of it as being a smaller, clabbered house, and this looks like it's clearly a brick building that looks from the outside. From some shots, it looks like an apartment building. I don't know. It just seems a little off model to me. Also, I didn't think that they had yet established, or I thought it was only established later, that Doc Ock could control his arms telepathically when they weren't attached to him.
This might be the first time they do that.
But I think that later it shows up as like a new story development. It's almost like somebody forgot or didn't know that this had already happened and then later went and set that up. But who knows how retcons and different changes to the story have happened through the years.
Well, you've got to think about how many pages Stan was writing a month at this point.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Fair dues to the guy. If he's just turning out stuff as fast as he is. I mean, how many of these stories that we're looking at today were written by Stan? I mean, this is 1 month's output.
The question is, how much of them were written by Stan? That, from what we, that's something we're always going back and forth on with these things. Yeah. And I don't think that either of us are either a Stan super partisan or a Kirby Ditko super partisan, because some of those folks can get really, fundamentalist about how, this was all written by this person in the thing and no contributions from the other. But, I do think that this could very easily be a decision made by Romita. And the last thing I'll mention is the second to last panel. Peter Parker says, Ock broke through the wall for one reason, to flaunt his strength before me out of pure cussedness. But now he'll learn how cussed Spider-Man can be. And it just really seems like an odd line, especially because at that point, cussedness has to be pronounced that way. But is the next one cussed or cussed? I don't know. And it takes me out of the story because I'm trying to figure it out. Okay, well, do we have anything else to say about this issue before we move on to Daredevil?
I got to say, in all of them, I'm so envious of the kids getting to watch America's best TV comics are on TV. The 2-page ad that runs in all of them with a Fantastic Four cartoon and the Spider-Man cartoon. It's like, yeah. We didn't get those over here.
Okay. All right. So here comes Daredevil, the man without fear. I'm going to try to be as brisk as you were, Matt, but who knows if I'll be able to do that. So on the cover, look, Daredevil's helpless. The Beetle is about to unmask him, says Foggy in a crowd of people, as Daredevil is up on a stage with the Beetle, with his very Beetle-like bendy, twisty fingers and his very flight-capable heavy metal wings. So, the story, to squash a beetle. Let's hear it for Stan the Man Lee and Gene the Dean Colan, who bring you this action-packed thriller chiller, ably assisted by John Tartaglione, inker, Artie Simek, letterer. In the previous issue, Daredevil had just shown up in this little town that was somewhere in between New York City and Montreal, and he was trying to warn the people that the Beetle was there and they need to beware. And it turns out that this is a town that is entirely inhabited by the Beetle's goons. The Beetle doesn't seem like a big enough villain to have goons, but apparently he's got enough to fill a whole town. So Daredevil is fighting the Beetle and his goons.
I love the fact that we start in the middle of a story. I used to love that as a kid. I'd pick up a comic and it'd be like, this is halfway over. What's going on?
I think that there was an idea that, kids don't like two-part stories, or, you got to think of the children. They won't want this to be a two-part story. And that certainly was not the case for me as a kid. That would just get me excited to find the rest of the story, and I didn't have a problem getting caught up in medias res. And it sounds like you didn't either, Mike. It sounds like you liked that as a kid.
No. It was great. I do not remember this story at all. I mean, it must have been reprinted in British Marvel, but I have no memory of it at all.
Well, it could be they just said, yeah, we can skip this one. Daredevil ends up getting knocked out by the Beetle, and then the Beetle tells his goons, I don't want him harmed. And they're, of course, just like, what do you mean? We got him dead to rights. And as always, the villain is like, no, I have better plans. So they tie him up and put him in the back of a truck. Of course, they then make a point that he is making himself stiff as a board to make him harder to manage, when, of course, everybody knows that you go limp in order to be harder to manage. But, whatever. So they truck him up to Montreal. We get a brief recap of the Beetle's origin, which is completely unnecessary, and we don't need to go into that in any way, shape, or form.
Oh, I don't know. I think that it's worth taking a minute to go then to complement my Beetle wings, I devised a form of metal hydraulic-powered fingers tipped with heavy-duty suction feelers. That's not what beetles do. That does not complement your Beetle's wings. Do you even know what the word complement means? But anyway, okay, let's keep going.
Yes, and I guess they're trying to walk back the whole idea of previously they specifically said that his wings were heavy, which doesn't make any sense for wings. Here they seem to be backing off of that and saying that it's some kind of special alloy that, presumably might be better suited to such things. So they smuggle Daredevil into one of the pavilions in Expo 67, where Foggy and Karen, who were on the way up there with so-called Mike Murdock in the previous issue, and he disappeared to go fight the bad guy goons on the train. At this point, they're just like, well, I guess we're in Montreal, and we still don't see Mike Murdock or Daredevil, so we'll just go to the expo like we had planned, even though we do not know if our friend, or if our imaginary friend is alive or dead. So they have somehow commandeered an as-yet unused pavilion or something like that in order to have a whole big exhibition where they're going to unmask Daredevil on stage. He, of course, gets loose and is able to dispatch most of the goons. The Beetle is able to get him with his suction cup fingers, and he's tied up. Foggy decides to be a hero. He yells, "Hang on, Daredevil, hang on," and starts charging the stage. Karen says, "Foggy, wait, you'll be killed." And he says, "Not me, I'm too dumb to die." Which is just such a weird line. What is up
not
with
entirely
that?
Untrue. He's
well, yes,
as a character who has consistently fallen for the Mike Murdock, Matt Murdock con, then he certainly is not the brightest character that Marvel has ever had.
Anyway, so Foggy is able to free Daredevil from the grips of the Beetle's suction cups, and Daredevil is able to dispatch with the rest of the bad guys. On the last page, he turns back into Mike Murdock, but right beforehand, there is a panel, third panel on page 20, where Daredevil is like whispering to Karen, "Did you bring the suitcase from the train, girl?" It says, "Natch, boy, we checked it in a locker." And she just could not look more flirtatious. If there is no extra flirtation that could be drawn into that panel. Once again, she really likes that Mike Murdock is a massive prick.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. I think, let me see. I think that was all the only other thing that I will point out is when Foggy is rescued Daredevil and is now in the grips of the Beetle himself. He's being held up, 20 feet above the ground, and he says to Daredevil, "Don't worry about me, masked man. I'm round enough to bounce." He's not even that chubby. This is what is going on. He's just sort of internalized everything that Mike Murdock is saying about him at this point. So Mike, not Mike Murdock, but Mike Collins, do you have anything to say about this issue?
I really, really wish John Tartaglione had not inked it.
I know, right?
Seriously.
Oh, ow. It hurts. I mean, I know Collins like one of those impossible artists to ink, but yeah, this doesn't work.
Yeah, Frank Giacoia had been inking this book and had been doing a really nice job. And then about 6 months ago, he left and Tartaglione took over. And Tartaglione is just not dealing with the suppleness of Colan's pencils at all. He's making them he's trying to turn Gene Colan and make him sort of jagged and hard-edged, which he cannot be.
We aren't reading the Sergeant Fury books right now, but Tartaglione, at least for a while, I don't know if he still is at this point, was inking Dick Ayers penciling. And I'm not a big fan of Dick Ayers pencils, and I'm not a big fan of John Tartaglione's inks, but somehow the two of them really complement each other quite well.
Yeah.
But Colan, not at all.
No,
it's really unfortunate because you can see the figure work of the character stuff that Colan just does so effortlessly. He's just, I don't know what the word is. It's stymied. It's frustrating. There's a beautiful shot on page 13, frame 1, where you've got the guy operating the camera, and it's like a little figure on a really full frame. And it's just a beautiful piece of artwork. I mean, I would kill to be that confident, and that's so smooth. It's just great.
Yeah.
It's just a throwaway figure, and it just looks, that feels real.
The cameraman on the big boom that's up in the air. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's nice.
I say the only other thing I'd say is that it's weird reading this after all those years of like post-Miller Daredevil.
I know.
Daredevil calling somebody sweetie. I mean,
Yeah. Well, it's
like,
given
what?
that you had your first ever work in a Alan Moore scripted parody of Daredevil. Yeah. So you were right there at the time. And when everything was changing. And yes, the pre-Miller book could not be a bigger record scratch when you're used to reading post-Miller Daredevil. I agree. Yeah. I did like this issue. I didn't like this issue. Let me be clear. I did not like this issue. I did like in this issue how Foggy Nelson suddenly jumped up to sort of become a hero and save who he thinks he's saving, Mike, who has treated him so poorly. And that was sort of nicely ironic. But generally, this issue is pretty terrible. I don't like the Beetle. I don't like the convoluted villain plan of unmasking him at a pavilion at the World's Fair, which just makes no sense. Not a fan of particularly these things, like you said. And of course, it says at the end, next issue on the trail of the Trapster, aka Pastepot Pete. So we're going to have yet another old Strange Tales Human Torch villain. So the Beetle was an old Strange Tales Human Torch villain, and now we're going to have the Trapster, another Strange Tales Human Torch villain. That is not a good source of villains, Stan. Do not tap into that book for your villains. Those were terrible villains. That was a terrible book, and now you are making your new book terrible as well.
I think this actually draws attention to what we were saying earlier about how much Stan was involved in the writing of stuff and how much the artists were. I don't ever get the impression that Colan was a big contributor to the story ideas, whereas Kirby and Ditko and other artists were. I say Stan was just basically just sort of like, who have I got? I can put him in. Whereas Kirby would be, I've got this great new character, and here he is for 15 pages, and you've never heard of him before, but this is his name, and this is what he does. And it's like, okay, we'll go with that.
Yeah, very good point. Yeah, we just read the Daredevil Annual where they had a backup story where it had Gene Colan begging Stan for plots, and Stan basically going like, I don't know, you make them up. And Gene Colan saying he didn't want to. So we don't have to theorize about this. We can actually read a bizarre story in the Daredevil Annual where they actually lay out what their relationship was. Okay, everyone, let's move on to The Mighty Thor, number 146, If the Thunder Be Gone. We are in the middle of this bizarre storyline where Odin is pissed at Thor again. He had been okay with Thor for about a year worth of comics, and then suddenly has decided again, even though Thor is no longer in love with the mortal, he still, because Thor is not so much at his beck and call anymore, he's going to take away most of his powers, except for his super strength. He's still going to get to keep Mjolnir the hammer, but when he throws it, it's just going to fall down on the ground. It's not going to come back to him. So he's got this bizarre sort of mix of having his old powers and not. But now he has been hypnotized into joining the circus of crime, which he is doing. Fun splash page of him lifting a huge barbell with Princess Python on one end and the Gambono brothers on the other end, although I think they're called Gambinos now.
No, they were called Gambinos in the previous issue. They're called Gambonos again in this issue.
Okay. So then Ringmaster comes up. He's like, hey, you like Thor, so I'll give you a Thor costume. Oh, let's go and do the credits. A Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby Festival of Fabulous Fantasy, delineation by Vince Colletta, lettering by Artie Simek. So let me, before I go on, Mike, where do you fall on the big Vince Colletta debate? What do you think of Vince Colletta?
Oh, well, a friend of mine who is a divorce lawyer, I will say up front, so he has got a lot of money. He owns several pages of Tales of Asgard. And I've seen the originals and I've wept because not only did Vinny not ink half of each page, he didn't even bother rubbing the pencils out. You can still see the pencils there. And it's like, oh, this is a travesty.
Yes. I'm glad to hear that you were on our side.
Oh, I mean, at some point, it was too late when I actually got into American comics, but I would love to have had one job where he inked me, but yeah, this is... I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate they used him because he could work really fast. But
I will say, as a preview of coming attractions, I will say that his job in Avengers was surprisingly competent. But generally not as good.
So then this brings us to page number 4, which should be a truly spectacular page because Kirby loves circuses. And here you get Thor riding on a steed at the head of a big circus going into the big tent. And it is gorgeously drawn by Kirby and atrociously inked by Colletta. Everybody's eyes are just gashes. You know that Kirby did not draw their eyes like that, even at such a far distance. You know that Kirby had more personality in everything he did than ended up in this page. I think this page just, you can tell it's beautifully penciled, but in the end, it looks pretty atrocious. I mean, look at the clown. The clown is sketched in 2 seconds.
And he doesn't have his left hand either.
Yeah. Everything does just look very flat. Looks almost like it was inked with a ballpoint pen.
Yeah, it does. Anyway, it's a real shame. So then Thor is showing that he can swing his hammer, but then it doesn't come back to him. So the ringmaster has to hypnotize everyone in the audience to make them think that his hammer came back to him to try to convince them he's Thor, which of course he really is. Meanwhile, they decide to do something that they have been planning since last issue. They decide to go to a museum and steal a giant golden bull. So the Circus of Crime, I guess this is after the circus is over for the day, go ahead and break into this museum, get past all the guards. The clown is there on his unicycle. I'm not sure that's the best plan. But Princess Python has her giant python. She breaks into the place as well. Thor lifts up the giant golden bull, carries it out of there. The guards are amazed. Meanwhile, we see Odin, Sif, and Balder sort of watching the whole thing on TV, sort of chewing popcorn, wondering how it's all going to go down. There's a fun bit here where the guards are shooting at the Circus of Crime, and the ringmaster decides to hypnotize the guards into shooting slightly to the left, so that there's still all these bullets flying at them, but they're not quite hitting them. And he's like, Human Cannibal is like, why didn't you hypnotize him into not firing us at all? And he's like, there wasn't time, but what does it matter? Take a look. That's why it matters. The sound of gunfire is snapping Thor out of his spell. And Thor's like, the shots, what is happening? What am I doing here? And I like this sheer idiocy of the ringmaster to not realize what the problem is in his plan. Then we end there right in the middle of everything going on. And Odin is still swearing he's not going to help. And Thor is caught between the guards who are shooting at him and the Circus of Crime, who he is no longer supporting. That is the end of the front half of this issue. Do we have anything else to say about it? Mike, did you have anything else to say about this issue?
I love the fact that the guards are all running around with guns and Stan's had a bit of dialogue about, well, we can't shoot them because they're not shooting us.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, nice. That's good. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, granted, these cops do have a flamethrower squad, but so that's not good.
Okay, the guy using the flamethrower inside to burn the wall away, which is brick.
Good point.
And it's pulled away then by a magnet. And it's a square hole that comes off, but it's a jagged hole when he's pushing the thing through it. So,
Yes.
Yeah. I think this was done at great speed.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, nobody stopped and went, hang on a second, that doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, Kirby is down to $3 a month. He used to be doing, up to $5 or $6 a month. So he's down to $3. So you would think he could take a little more time. But of course, he's got a brand new backup feature he's going to be starting doing this issue, which we will get to shortly. Steve, did you have anything to say about this issue before we go into the backup feature?
The one thing I'll point out that you didn't already go into is when the cops do open fire, they are just hitting that priceless cultural artifact with just a hail of lead. Which, I'm just like, oh, dude, no, that's not okay. Don't do that.
Yeah, gold famously soft, so yes. You can really cause some damage by shooting it with bullets.
Yes.
All right, so tragically, last issue, they decided to wrap up Tales of Asgard. Last issue was the final Tales of Asgard story. So what are they going to do now? Well, we have the origin of the incomparable Inhumans. Right away, I'm like, oh, I don't like the Inhumans as much as I like Volstagg, Fandral, and Hogun, the Warriors 3, who we've been focusing on in Tales of Asgard, so that's a shame. But I really like this story. Conceived and created by Marvel's mighty masters of mythology, Stan the Man Lee and Jack King Kirby. Inking Joe Sinnott, so that's great. Lettering Artie Simek. So Vince Coletta had been inking the backup feature, Tales of Asgard, and now we have Joe Sinnott inking the new backup feature, so that's a huge improvement. That's great to see.
I hadn't paid much attention to the credits, and on the second or third page, I was like, wait a minute, this inking looks suspiciously good. Went back to the beginning, and it's like, oh, okay, Joe Sinnott, that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah. So then I had remembered this feature as being scripted by Kirby, and I was surprised to see that Stan gets writing credit on it, but it certainly feels like Kirby. This is a classic Kirby story beginning with going back to cavemen times, and they're fighting giant sloths, but there's these high-tech guys who are sort of keeping apart from the cavemen, and we see that they have their own sort of high-tech headquarters on a rocky island that is already called Atalan, which is the name of the city of the Inhumans yet to be today. And their leader, Brandak, is saying, hey, I think that we Inhumans should take the next step. I think we should all expose ourselves to something called the Terrigen Mists, and it'll turn us into superhumans, which he then becomes the first to do. Now, they already seem like they are superhumans, given how much more advanced they are than the cavemen around them. I don't know how they've managed to get so advanced without the Terrigen Mist, but now they're going to be even more advanced. I thought this was Kirby at its best. This feels like pure Kirby. It doesn't feel like Lee at all in terms of Kirby loves to do ancient civilizations. He loves to do a combination of cavemen and space age technology. And I thought this was fantastic. Mike, we'll start with you. What did you think of this backup story?
This is entirely a Kirby script.
It has to be.
All the emphasis is all on the wrong words. That's how you tell it's a Kirby script. A race, which means to defy, and like in every caption, it's like the wrong word has been emphasized in this. But yeah, it's wonderful though. I adore the artwork. The artwork's fantastic. You can see that Kirby spent like about 3 times as long drawing this as he did drawing the Thor lead strip. It almost feels like this was done for something else, and then they just slotted it in here.
You do wonder that.
Oh, the inking's gorgeous. Oh. I just say page 3, panel 2, where you've got the Neanderthals looking out. Those are just such gorgeous faces.
Yeah, they're great.
The whole thing's a beautiful page.
Yeah, I've always said that Coletta is not just a bad inker, he turns Kirby into a bad penciler. And I think that's partly what you're saying here, is that it's impossible to tell whether Kirby is just spending a lot more time on this backup feature or if he spent just as much time on the front feature, but that work was squandered by Coletta.
It could be a bit of both, yeah.
Okay, Steve, did you have anything to say about the Inhumans feature?
The Inhumans have always been, I've always found them to be better when they are supporting characters than when you focus on them. Now, granted, this isn't the current modern Inhumans, but yeah, I did have a little bit of that confusion that you were talking about, well, how are they already this far advanced? Now, I think later they say that the Kree had come and experimented on them, and that's how we got this super advanced section of humanity here, but that clearly has not been conceived of yet.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'm a little bit like, I'm not sure if I'm, where this is going to go. And yeah, I do miss Tales of Asgard.
Yeah, I do.
Interesting side thing on that. If you read the letters page, because I've been reading everything in these issues, somebody makes some comment about the Kree. And Stan or whoever's writing the letters page says, we forgot about the Kree. I'm just thinking, you've just had an Inhuman strip.
Yeah.
They're not connected yet.
Maybe that's where he gets the idea. I don't know.
Oh, you do wonder, yeah. Synchronicity,
yeah.
Okay. Steve, should we go ahead and do Tales to Astonish?
We will. And so the Incredible Hulk and Prince Namor the Submariner, Tales to Astonish, introducing the Legion of the Living Lightning. And we have Marie Severin and presumably Herb Trimpe on this cover, using a lot of Kirby Crackle on there. So that's interesting. Also a lot of whiteout for the explosion effect, which could be more successful, although I think that the colorist might be having something to do with it not working as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Legions of Living Lightning. The latest and greatest Smilin' Stan Lee and Madcap Marie Severin literary and artistic smasheroo, inked by Howlin' Herb Trimpe, lettered by Scowlin' L.P. Gregory. I don't know if we've seen that name before, but,
yeah, he shows up a couple of times this month.
So in the previous issue, we had ended a whole storyline, and there was really no indication of what was going to be happening next with Hulk. So this is just starting from scratch here. He happens to be jumping around and crashes into a jet. Hulk rescues the pilot from the crashed jet and actually is able to put a splint on him, which seems a little bit advanced for the Hulk, but, hey, that's great. And he's like, oh, good, maybe I'll get some credit for actually having helped somebody. But then he's like, wait a minute, but no, then they're going to think that I caused all the damage, which he kind of sort of did, but not really on purpose. Anyway, this guy convinces the Hulk that this group that he's with is going to be friends with him, and Hulk likes friends, so he takes the guy to this lair. We'll come back to that in a moment. Meanwhile, both the Army and the Teen Brigade are searching for the Hulk and don't know where he is. Get a little bit of the soap opera stuff in there as well. But then when the Hulk comes into this secret lair, he is zapped by the Legion of the Living Lightning to the point where he's actually unconscious. Then they convince him that they are friendly to him and that they want to be his friend and that they are good guys. Meanwhile, we have seen that they clearly are not actually good guys. Major Talbot, being the security guy for the army base, is actually following the trail to this Legion of the Living Lightning hideout, and he ends up getting snatched by the Legion of the Living Lightning, comes in, finds the Hulk there. He's like, aha, I knew it, you're a traitor. And the Hulk at this point at the end is still convinced that he is with the good guys, and we will find out what happens next issue. Hulk-inued next issue.
As always.
Yeah, they've been using that phrase for the last year or more, maybe 2 years, and it's really not working. They need to stop it with that.
Yeah, it's like their version of same bat time, same bat channel, but it makes no sense. But they love it. It's always Hulk-inued.
So, Mike, what say you on this story?
It's kind of weird seeing Herb inking Mary as opposed to the other way around.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm not sure it entirely works, but there's some interesting frames in there. Because when she inks him, or when John Severin inks him, it looks amazing because it gives the artwork weight and texture.
In like a year from now, you're going to have Herb Trimpe penciling and John Severin inking, and Trimpe is going to be doing basically a Kirby pastiche, but then Severin is going to be adding this sort of EC gloss onto this Kirby pastiche, and you would think it wouldn't work, and it works beautifully. But here we have the opposite. We have Marie Severin inked by Herb Trimpe. I like it. I like it a lot, but I don't like it quite as much as I'm going to like Trimpe penciling inked by John. But I'm still a fan of this book. I think this is pretty nice artwork.
I've always got time for Mary's pencils.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, a couple other things said about this issue. So you sort of glossed over how much of a coincidence this is, where Major Talbot and Thunderbolt Ross are told, you're no longer allowed to track the Hulk. You now have to track this new threat to America, the Living Lightning. Abandon the Hulk, forget all about him, track the Living Lightning. And then they go to track the Living Lightning, and they're like, oh, here's the Hulk. Just by coincidence, here he is, which is sheer coincidental plotting, which I'm never a big fan of. It's a little unclear in this issue what the Living Lightning is. Like, is that the name of the guy, or is that the name of the group, or is that the name of their device? That's a little bit unclear. And indeed, the Living Lightning will become completely forgotten. This is, a one-off, forgotten villain, partially because it's not even clear what's going on here. But it's fine. It's fine for this one issue. And I like the art, so I like this issue.
Anything else either of you have to say about that before we move on to Submariner?
I love the idea of serving the Hulk some coffee.
Very good point. Yes.
Generally, I would hope decaf. If I'm going to serve the Hulk coffee, I'm gonna be serving him decaf.
Yeah, wise choice. So, to move on to Prince Namor the Submariner, the Sovereign and the Savages. Now, this is a story, Matt, I think that many, many episodes ago, you talked about how just about every recording session, you get to one particular issue where you're like, did I even read this one? What happened in this one? And this is that one for me, so I'm going to do my best. All right, so Stan Lee prestigiously presents a Roy Thomas Werner Roth classic of cataclysmic chaos, inked by Dan Adkins, lettered by L.P. Gregory. So we had the Werner Roth Dan Adkins combo in X-Men a couple of months ago, did we not? Or did they not overlap?
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Yeah. I think we did for at least one issue. Maybe the Spider-Man crossover issue, I believe, was. Which works out okay. It's, fine.
Oh, I think the art in this Submariner is just atrocious. I think that Adkins, who is an excellent inker, just cannot save Roth at all. Roth had a year's or more worth of X-Men and then had disappeared for a couple months. And I'd been hoping he would disappear, never to be seen again. But here he is back doing Submariner after having had some good art, some Everett art, some Adkins art. Now we've got Werner Roth, and it's just, I think, a damn shame.
Well, as I said, this is one where I'm like, did I even read this one? So I was just sort of vamping there when I said that it turned out okay.
Spoiler alert, it did not.
So Submariner is caught in some sort of energy rings by the Plunderer, who is one of my least favorite villains. He just looks terrible and he's just not good. But they're on Skull Island in the Savage Land. We see that the Swamp Men are, always having to be fought off from Skull Island here because they're savages. Plunderer talks about how his vibro ray, or whatever it's called, powered by the so-called Plunder Stone, which will later be retconned to being another type of vibranium, has been readjusted to where it no longer just vibrates metal. It can shatter just about anything. So that's not good. That's a bad thing. And it ends up falling into the hands of one of the swamp men. The swamp men are then able to break into the Skull Island hideout. And is there like a 3-way fight going on between them and the Plunderer and Submariner? They like 3-way fights in Submariner, don't they? This is at least the third one of these we've gotten in the last 6 or so months. Anyway, they're fighting each other. The swamp men are able to drop a huge chunk of concrete or something like that on the Submariner and subdue him. The Plunderer is then like, aha, I have won. He then leaves the burning Skull Island, so his Skull Island hideout seems to be no more at this point. The Submariner is, fortunately, in the flaming wreck, there's a pipe that bursts loose and gets water on him, which revives him after he was all dry and hot from the fire, which weakened him. He then ends up essentially teaming up with the Swamp Men, or looks more or less like that. Meanwhile, back in Atlantis, Dorma and Vashti are under the impression that Submariner has now teamed up with the Plunderer, who has a mad-on for Atlantis. They think that he's turned traitor again, and they temporarily devolve power down to the council. Meanwhile, Submariner is being feted by the Swamp Men while he is thinking, I need to go off and take care of stuff in Atlantis soon, but I'm going to go ahead and enjoy this feast, which he should not be doing because there are things going on in Atlantis he needs to take care of.
Yes.
And the Plunderer is meanwhile on his way to attack Atlantis. So that's the story. Next-ish, If Atlantis Should Perish, enough said. I found this to be a forgettable issue, as I have made abundantly clear. I can't wait to get rid of the Plunderer, but unfortunately he will be around for at least the next issue.
Yes, unfortunately. Mike, what do you think of this Submariner comic?
I love Dan Adkins inks on anything, but like you say, even he can't save this. It's just the laziest frame setups. I mean, it's not good. And the story's dumb. Yeah, no.
Succinct way of putting it.
If I was 11 and reading this, I'd just go, no.
Dumb story. Yeah, no, Werner Roth is just one of my least favorite Marvel pencilers ever. Yeah, just the basic storytelling here, and then the individual with the faces just look absolutely terrible. I did think it was interesting in this issue that the Plunderer says that he rules the Savage Land, and he says, oh yeah, that time when the X-Men visited Savage Land, I was just out of town for the week, and that's why they didn't notice that I ruled the Savage Land, which I thought was interesting. As always, whenever we talk about the Savage Land, I have to talk about what is the light source in the Savage Land. Is it underground? Does the Earth have an interior sun? Never clear. It's made more clear that there is a sun in the sky here when they were in the Savage Land, even though they seem to be underground. Never quite clear. And of course, it's very silly that Dorma and Vashti just so quickly leapt to the assumption that Namor and the Plunderer were working together, which makes no sense at all. But it's fine. That's of such stuff are stories made. I understand.
Okay.
Okay.
So are we ready to move on to X-Men?
Yep. Let's go ahead and move on to X-Men. Let's go ahead and do X-Men number 38. Humanity has never seen more awesome archfiends than the Blob and the Vanisher. Humanity has never faced a deadlier disaster than Doomsday. Bonus starting in this blockbuster-ish and new Smash series, The Origins of the X-Men, which I like. I like that they're going to start a new backup series giving us Origins of the X-Men, which is more interesting. The backstory is more interesting than the front story at this point, so that's probably for the best. This cover is presumably Adkins. Looks like a Dan Adkins cover to me. Doesn't look like it's swiped. Rare non-swipe Adkins. I don't know. Maybe it is. But I don't think we've ever seen the Blob grab Angel in this way, so I don't think it can be a direct swipe. But unfortunately, the inside is not Adkins. Because once again, we had Werner Roth penciling this book and then had thankfully disappeared, only to unfortunately show up back in Submariner. Meanwhile, we had Don Heck penciling the Avengers for 30 issues, and then he had disappeared for a couple months, only to now show up penciling the X-Men. So this is the beginning of a run of Don Heck issues of X-Men, inked by George Bell, a.k.a. George Russo's one of Marvel's worst inkers. Smilin' Stanley edits and elsewise enhances a Roy Thomas Don Heck shimmering chef d'oeuvre, inked by gingerly George Bell, lettered by elfish L.P. Gregory. Really terrible art. Just on this front page, look at the beast's feet. Like, what is deciding what line weight goes where on this drawing of the beast's feet? totally unclear. The Sinister Shadow of Doomsday, the X-Men are still fighting against the Mutant Master, but then they manage to steal 2 of his flying gravity discs and get away before the place explodes. You may find that a little hard to believe. Well, you are not the only one, because the Changeling also finds this plot a little hard to believe, which is to say that Roy Thomas finds what Don Heck has drawn a little hard to believe and feels the need to call it out in the writing because he has Changeling saying to the Mutant Master, "Yes, sire. Still, there is one thing I do not comprehend. How did the 2 Magno discs come to be left completely operational in our base that exploded?" And then the Mutant Master says, "Fool, what can such things matter?" So we're seeing Thomas and Heck fighting it out in the dialogue, describing Thomas's confusion about why Heck drew it that way. Presumably, I'm assuming they're doing Marvel method here. We get to page 4. One of the worst penciled and inked Marvel pages I've ever seen, I gotta say.
Panel 2, what is up with Changeling's eyes?
I know.
They're just so weirdly shaped.
To those of you who are not reading them, I don't know how to describe this. He's got very weird blobby eyes. Let's just say that. Just the look of the Blob's face on the bottom, everybody's face, just horrific. Heck seemingly drew this issue very quickly. George Roussos inked it even more quickly. It is bizarre. Meanwhile, it's a very complicated plot. I will not attempt to describe it all. The X-Men say, hey, as long as we got away in 2 ships, let's go ahead and go to seemingly Moscow and Washington, D.C. to stop the Mutant Master from putting these places at war with each other. But then they get there and the would-be Brotherhood of Evil Mutants is there in, I guess this is Moscow. It's all very unclear. And they have to fight them there. I guess the Vanisher can vanish anywhere and reappear anywhere else, so he managed to keep up with them. Changeling is slapping around Charles Xavier, meanwhile, back in wherever the Mutant Master was based. There's lots of fighting going on. Oh my god, the penciling and inking on page 11 of Iceman is, just this whole thing just looks like, you said that sometimes it looks like Gil Kane inks with a laundry marker. This whole thing looks like it was inked with a laundry marker. Attention being put to line weights, being paid to anything is just non-existent.
No, the laundry marker means that you get all dead weight lines. This right here looks like it was inked by somebody who didn't yet know how to use a brush very well.
Yeah, something went very, very wrong. Anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time on this issue. They're all fighting in these various places around the world. They're defeating the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but the Mutant Master is still up to his shenanigans and says, within minutes, an explosion will occur behind the Iron Curtain while a brace of missiles will lift off from the United States, and in that final fateful moment, the Mutant Master shall have achieved victory. Next-ish, the fateful finale. So this Factor 3 storyline has been going on for a long time, more than a year, I think, and it'll be nice to have it finally wrapped up next issue. Still, I have no idea why they're called Factor 3, but that was this issue.
Which is probably why you keep on referring to them as the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants.
Yes. So, Mike, what did you think of this issue?
Oh, dear. Well, I love the X-Men. Because I'm just struck dumb by this issue. Page 11, that is,
Yes. What on earth? This is a page where it's got Cyclops in the foreground shooting his beam and Iceman in the background shooting some ice. But it's just, oh my God.
That's not even 10 minutes work, that page.
No.
It was saying about this bit where Roy's arguing with his penciler. This whole thing where Professor X is talking to the Changeling, and then we get this weird thing where he said, look how simple it was to design a device which allows you to hear and speak, yet be otherwise helpless. I think, what? I don't understand. Again, as a kid, I would just be completely confused by what's going on here. This issue upset me. Art-wise and story-wise, it's just awful.
Yes.
Yep, not good.
Yep. No.
Did you have anything to add, Steve?
At one point, Marvel Girl is saying, well, at least we know where to go. We've got to hurry if we want to have a chance to prevent a nuclear holocaust. And it just sort of seems like a real kind of toss-off line for something that's kind of a big deal. Let's see. We get a really unimpressive and unhelpful cutaway drawing at one point of the bomb that's under the table in Moscow. That cutaway drawing does not help at all. So on page 8, panel 1, 2, 3, 4, down at the bottom right-hand corner of that page is one of those little things where an inker kind of screws up, where you go ahead and put in little X's in an area to indicate you need to black it in later, and then you forget to do so. One of my early issues, I think my first issue of Hunter Age of Magic, I did that in in the final panel. And nobody noticed. It made it to print, which is always rather interesting. There's nothing else of real interest here.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the backup feature, which is somewhat interesting. We have a man called X. So, there's the old Jewish parable about the guy who complains to his rabbi that his house is too small. And so the rabbi says, well, invite the cow to live with you inside your house. And says, now invite your ox to live with you inside your house. And then he's like, but this is just making my house smaller. And then he says, okay, now put the cow and the ox outside the house. Now doesn't your house seem bigger? Well, this is the same thing that is happening here, because it says Stan Lee proudly presents a pace-setting pinnacle of perfection by Roy Thomas and Werner Roth. Of course, John Verpooten, inker, and Sam Rosen, letterer, also did air palpitating part. So we had Werner Roth penciling this book, doing a terrible job, driving me crazy. Now he's gone, and he's been replaced with Don Heck, inked by George Russos, and now with Werner Roth, inked by John Verpooten, who we haven't seen very much inking at this point. I find this shockingly good. Now that Werner Roth has been replaced by somebody worse, suddenly Werner Roth looks much better, even though his art was terrible, inked by Vince Coletta. Wait, no. Who inked him on Submariner? Was that? No, it was inked by Atkins. But I remember it inked by Coletta. That's how bad that art was. But it says, this is the origins of the X-Men, a man called X. And we have a couple years younger Professor Xavier watching TV, seeing how much people hate mutants. They had earlier shown that people hadn't really started hating mutants until a couple issues into the X-Men, but here they hate them long before. There's articles in the newspaper about how much everybody hates mutants, and he decides he's going to put together the X-Men. There's a scene that was very faithfully recreated. This whole story was very faithfully recreated in the X-Men First Class movie, where young Xavier decides to start working with the government, and there's a scene where he goes to meet with the government and goes ahead and mind zaps everybody in the office to not see him as he rolls through the office. He wasn't rolling in X-Men First Class because he could still walk, but this scene of going through the office and mind zapping everyone so they can't see him is exactly recreated in that movie. He goes ahead and, with the government, watches film of Cyclops and realizes he's going to be the first person who recruits. We see Fred Dukes. No, not Fred Dukes. That's the Blob's real name. We see, what's his name? Fred Duncan. We see Fred Duncan pull a gun on him, but then he mind zaps him and says, nope, let's work together instead. And they go, okay, and they're going to work together. And that is the end of this comic. They shake hands and basically agree, all right, now let's recruit Cyclops next. I really like Verpooten's inks on Roth's pencils. I thought this issue looked a lot better than either Roth inked by Atkins or certainly than Heck inked by Russos. And I kind of liked this backup. We'll start with you, Mike. What did you think of it?
It feels like Kurt Schaffenberger.
That'd be high praise coming from me. I assume that's high praise coming from you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of weird bits, though. So when you've got the bit with Scott Summers in action, which they've got on film, everybody has bow ties.
True.
And is this just a Werner Roth thing? I don't know, but yeah, I don't know why there's so many bow ties. Like you say, I kind of like the artwork.
Shockingly good. Steve, did you have anything to say about it before we move on?
The only couple things I have to say. So, Mike, I end up reading these on Marvel Unlimited, which has recolored stories. So I'm wondering, on page 2, panel 1, are the stones of the circular driveway a catastrophic kaleidoscope of weird colors on yours, or is that just on the recoloring?
They're all kind of sepia. So there's like dark brown and light brown and a bit of gray.
Really?
Yeah, and
for this one, it's like a reddish brown, a green, a yellow, an orange, and a light purple. All just sort of
we don't have that
together.
That's probably how the original color plates looked, but obviously with newsprint, it all just faded. So I mean, people coloring back then had to do things brighter, and I don't think that ever really gets appreciated with a lot of reprints. But
absolutely,
it's true.
Yeah.
Okay, everyone, we're going to go ahead and record 2 episodes with Mike today, but that was the end of our first episode that we are recording with him, and then we're going to go ahead and while we have him on the phone from merry old Wales, I should say.
Oh, yeah.
We are going to go ahead and record the second half of November 1967. Do we have anything final to say about this first half of the books?
What's weird about reading these books shot from the original pages is just how bad the color register is on all of them.
Oh, it's awful, especially this month.
Yeah. It's wild just how far out it is.
Yeah, it's really a disaster in terms of Marvel's production quality just being rock bottom in terms of the color registering. You know, for those people who don't know what we're talking about how they'll color somebody's face and the skin tone will start half an inch above their face and end a half an inch above the bottom of their face so that everything is just off. It's really terrible. It's really atrocious, but it has a certain charm to it. I still would not read a computer recolored version if my life depended on it.
I take the bullet for you here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up there. Mike, stay on the phone and we will go ahead and do part 2. Thanks, everybody. Okay. We will see you soon.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Take care and stay safe out there.
All right. Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, we now have a Patreon where you can show your appreciation. If you've got a few bucks, head over to patreon.marvelrereadclub.com to support us. Also, you can still rate and review us at your podcatcher of choice, and that would be greatly appreciated as well. You can find us online at marvelrereadclub.com, as well as Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. See you next time.